Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen. With me today is longtime listener, poet laureate, and Taya Master Anne-Marie Young. This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today. So I have to ask you, Anne-Marie, now that you're back, you're settled in, are you past the jet lag?
Yes. Yeah. And I had COVID last week as well. So it was a double whammy.
Yeah. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling a lot better. I feel human at last.
Hey, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
All right.
Good.
Welcome back to the human race. We appreciate it.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
Yeah. But you did have a nice visit with your family in Minnesota, so I'm glad you had that. That was really good.
I did. It was amazing. Minnesota nice, I think it is, they say.
Okay.
And it's very, very true. They were all lovely.
So it's nice to know that there's good contagious stuff. That's good.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, we're going to explore a different avenue of health than what we have often done in the past. Not that we have not explored health. We've looked at health from a number of different angles. But our guest today has had a very direct connection with one of the most challenging forms of health issues that a human being can possibly face. And I'll let him tell his own story. But his name is Dave Mowry. And Dave has not only had to face this tremendous challenge, but he's found a really great way to accomplish that. And again, that's something else I'll let him tell the story on. So first of all, from Happy Valley in Oregon, I love the name of that little town. How you doing, Dave? Welcome to the show.
I'm doing well, Walt. How are you? Hi, Anne-Marie.
Hi, Dave. Good to have you on.
That's good to be here. Thank you.
So tell us the story. I mean, tell people, first of all, I haven't really clued people in on what you've been dealing with. So tell people what you deal with and give us a little idea of how you went about dealing with it.
Yeah, well, I live with bipolar disorder and severe anxiety, and that's most of it. But then there's a little OCD involved and a little PTSD from the living with the bipolar and all the challenges with that. So I kind of got a lot of different things going on. But my bipolar disorder and severe anxiety are the worst. I've got, lived for, we seemingly had it all, and I had businesses. My wife and I were happy. We had a family, and we seemingly had it all. And then one day I was driving down the freeway between businesses. I was under a bunch of stress, and my mind snapped, literally snapped. I could hear like a twig snap and an electric shock, and my face went, my muscles in my face went slack, and my voice went monotone, and my vision got blurry, and it was everything I could do to get home and just sit on the couch and just try to be. And that was the beginning of my 14 lost years and dark days of just doing everything I could just to be, just to hold it together and to keep the manic cycles from going too high and the depression from going too low.
And that's something that I think everybody who does not experience that kind of condition, including myself, kind of has a hard time relating to, like, what could that possibly be like? I mean, we can kind of try to imagine it, but can you convey to us what's it like to live with that day by day?
It's first, you don't know. I didn't know who was going to wake up in the morning. I didn't know if it was going to be the me that could talk, could do things, or the me that had to sit. Lots of times I hid in the shadows and suffered in silence. I couldn't talk to people. If I couldn't go to the mailbox to get the mail, because if I saw a neighbor, I'd be too overwhelmed and anxious, and I'd know if they looked in my eyes, they'd see the sadness and the loss and the insecurity inside. So I'd go to the mailbox at night. We lost our house. We were homeless for 18 months with the kids and my wife and the kids. And during that time, the feeling of failure and guilt and anxiety and just the depression of just being in mud, just not being able to move, just like I said, everything I could do just to be. I couldn't take a shower. I didn't shower for months. I was too depressed to shower. I'd sleep in my clothes because it was too much to take them off at night and put them back on in the morning. it was, the depression was awful. And then I go into these short spurts of mania where I thought I was the smartest person in the room and I thought I could do anything. And I was actually, during those times, I was cocky, I was a jerk and pushed people away. And after it was over, then I realized what had happened and how it had gone, and then the guilt and the anxiety, and that would throw me back into the depression. But the depression would come and go, and the mania would come and go, but the anxiety was always there, and in many ways, it was the worst part.
Sure. Well, I can certainly relate to that, I guess, the best, simply because while I have trouble imagining what it's like to go through that cycle that you described. I mean, I hear you say it, obviously, I can kind of imagine it a little bit, but it's still kind of hard to imagine it because I know I used to be married to a psychotherapist, so I have some basic understanding about how this stuff works. And from the way it's described to me, it's not like small changes. We're talking like massive shifts in mood that go on, and trying to imagine what those massive shifts are like is more than I've been able to accomplish. But I can understand the anxiety part. I mean, if that's something that is continuous, it's consistent, well, I think that's something anybody can relate to, because anyone who's experienced anything that's chronic can get that part. And certainly if I was going through that kind of cycle, I could see why I could be anxious too. So it'd also be a question of, why wouldn't you be anxious? I mean, seriously.
Yeah, it's a question of the level of anxiety. It can go from nervousness to just being a bit shy to, and then there's this curve, and it goes. And one of the ways to explain it is my bucket. A psychiatrist told me my bucket of anxiety was, well, most people, they have a bucket and it's like half full and they get anxious and they get nervous and it comes back down and they go, and they can deal with it. My bucket is almost full all the time. So if there was any trigger, anything at all, it would just overflow and overwhelm me. Mm-hmm. And what would happen with me would be I'd have panic attacks, and constantly, over and over and over. If there was anything that truly made me more anxious, I would start to sweat, and I not just a little bit. The sweat would run down my forehead and soak my collar and my shirt sleeves, and I knew everybody was looking at me, and it was everything I could do. The fight or flight. It was everything I could do just to be there. I looked to escape as soon as I could, any way I could. And then the results of the panic attack, the overwhelming, the chemical imbalance and all the fight and flight and all that, it would stay with me for days. It would take days to recover from it. So yeah, that's that the anxiety. I knew the depression was awful. The lack of self-worth, the lack of being able to do anything. I tried to work. I think part of my story is that throughout these 14 lost years, I kept trying to work. And with a little bit of the mania, I think I can do that. I can do that. Mm-hmm. And so I'd get out and I'd get a job, or I'd try. But after 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks, I just couldn't do it. Couldn't do it. And I'd have to escape and get back. And finally, when I was towards the end of the 14 years, I got a job, a part-time job at Macy's. I worked 12 hours a week, minimum wage, doing everything I could just, to do it. And I did it, and I showed up and I rode the bus and I got there, and all these things were happening. And that was a huge success, and a huge success in my life.
Wow. Yeah. And when you've gone through something like that, that would be a huge success. So congratulations on having achieved that. But you also found a really novel way to help yourself climb out. Because I mean, that's one of the things that kind of goes through my mind as I hear your story. Like, okay, I get it. it's a really horrible situation. How on earth do you get out of it? You did manage to find a way out, but you haven't told us how you did that. How did you get your way out? And this is really something.
Yeah, well, first, got to say that my wife stayed with me during all these challenges, and I had her
Wow,
support.
that's
And
huge.
when we were broke and a couple $100,000 in debt, she took over and she held it together for us, and she got us out of it over time. And so she's the hero of my story.
Wow.
One day she saw in the newspaper that the organization NAMI, National Alliance on Mental Illness, was having a meeting near us. Their local affiliate was having a meeting, and she said, I should go to that. And so I did. I got in the car, I drove, and I sat in the parking lot for half an hour before I had the gumption, before I could go in. But I went in, and they said hi, but they didn't expect anything back from me. And there was no judgment and no expectations. And so that's how I discovered NAMI. And then through being associated with NAMI, they brought a comedian in from Vancouver, BC, and he teaches stand-up comedy to folks with a mental illness. And for some reason, I thought I could do that.
Wow. Why do you think you thought that?
When I was in the psychiatric unit, for a while at St. Vincent's Hospital, and I came up with a couple jokes as I was in there. I was in there, it was safe, I was calm, the anxiety had lifted. And so I came up with the joke, and the joke is, do you know why they keep the doors locked to the psychiatric unit?
Why is that?
Because there's so many people trying to get in. I know it's so simple and kind of silly and all that, but I came up with that joke. So I thought, that's a good joke. I can do that. So I took the class, and who knew, but I had the talent to write jokes, to come up with material. And what we did is we looked at our hard times and our dark days, and that's where our material comes from. And I had lots of material. And so what happened was we talked. The first meeting was kind of a what's up and how this is going to work. And then we told our stories. And then the third class, we started looking for humor in our experiences. And it changed everything in my life. I'd be driving down the road and hear a song, and it would trigger me. It would remind me of something, and I'd go back and relive the trauma from those hard times, whether the time being homeless or some other of the times, and it would trigger me. And then after starting to take the class, I'd hear that same song on the radio, and so the trigger would be there. I'd come up with that thought of that terrible time, and then I'd think, where can I find the humor in that? And it changed everything. Instead of the neuroplasticity that I believe in, the pathways in the brain, my pathways were deep on the going back to the trauma and the triggers over and over and over and over. And I'd get PTSD 4, 5, 6 times a day just from different stimuli. But saying, where can I find the humor in that? It just changed the pathway in my brain. And when I heard that song, or had a trigger, or had something that took me back to that trauma, I started looking for the humor in it, and found it for whatever reason,
Yeah, well, that's why I wanted to know. How did you?
knows?
I mean, because that's just straight. I mean, it's a great strategy. I love that you were doing it, but I know what it's like to be in that really depressed state. I've not experienced it the way you have, but I know what it's like to be there. I think most of us have to one extent. Or
Yeah.
When you're in that mindset, the last thing that comes to your mind is humor, and yet you found humor. It's like, first of all, congratulations. And second of all, how the hell did you do that?
Yeah, it's and I don't know. I teach stand-up comedy to other folks with a mental illness now, and I help them find the humor in their challenges and their dark days. It just comes to me. It just comes to me, and so I'm fortunate in that way.
Well, it's great that you can open yourself enough to get it, to let that in. I mean, because
Yeah,
certainly we get, we get messaging all the time, but letting it
right.
in is the hard part. And you're
Yeah,
letting it in.
letting it
You're
in.
like, whoa, that's great. That's
Yeah,
really great.
and it turned out I come up with jokes, and I'd like my jokes, and so I think they're
Better.
funny, and it was interesting because if I think something's funny, other people do too. I don't think everything's funny, and other people have different senses of humor, but if I think it's funny, other people do too. So that's where me coming up with the humor and then teaching other people and then performing, you say, where did it come from or how did it happen? And it just happened. Who would think it?
Yeah.
Just who would? I mentioned that when I was in the psych unit, I was at St. Vincent's Hospital.
Hmm.
And so I'd be driving down the road and something would trigger that and I'd go back to that dark day. But then I looked for the humor in it. And so I found the humor. When things were really bad, Heather said, okay, it's time. I was sitting on the couch and Heather said it was time to go. And I said, okay. And I thought we were going on vacation. And she took me to the hospital, to the psych unit. And on the second day, I was meeting with the psychiatrist. And he said, well, how's it going? And I said, not too bad, but the service here sucks. I ordered a margarita when I got here, and it still hasn't arrived yet. And he said, well, do you know where you are? And I said, well, my wife said it was going to be a surprise. I'm hoping St. Thomas. He said, no, it's St. Vincent's. So there you go.
I didn't even know they had their own island. I mean, it was an
I got
point, right?
St. Vincent. I got my own island. So where that humor comes from, I have no idea, but it's there. And I think from my experience in teaching other people, I think I've taught people at the Oregon State Hospital that are there for except for criminals, except for insanity, and taught a class down there. I've taught classes to homeless people. I've taught classes all over, and there hasn't been one person that hasn't been able to find humor and write jokes. I help them write the jokes, but find the humor in their experiences, and frankly, it changes lives. Changed my life. I don't have the PTSD anymore. I don't have the triggers. If something comes up, if I remember, whatever I'm thinking about, where can I find the humor in that? Mm-hmm. And the jokes just start flowing.
That's really good. Yeah. Now, can you give us any clues about what makes something funny when you're in that state of mind?
Yeah, there's an art to comedy. First of all, there's setups and punchlines and whatnot. That's kind of how it goes. Just like me and going to the hospital and my wife taking me, that happened. So that was real. Mm-hmm. And me going to the psych unit, that was real. And then the creative part comes up with, meeting with the psychiatrist.
Sure.
So good comedy is based in reality, based in truth. Mm-hmm. And then what happens is you come to where's the humor in that, and that is where the creativity comes in. That's where and what makes something funny is a surprise, the unexpected. If I was to say to you, do you know why the chicken crossed the road? Well, you know the answer. It's to get to the other side. Well, that's not funny. But if I was to say,
it wasn't even funny the first time I heard it.
No, it's like, okay, duh. But if I was to say to you, why did the farmer cross the road? You'd say, why? And I'd say, to get his chicken. So there's the unexpected.
Okay.
That's better than
sure.
So that's the unexpected, and that's the surprise, and that's what makes people laugh.
Yeah.
The other things with comedy, the fewer words, it's extremely important. The more words, the worse it is. The fewest words possible. Use the fewest words possible. So I'm always editing my jokes to get just the right words and to keep it to a minimum. Mm-hmm. Putting one extra word in at the wrong place just takes it away. Just takes away from the humor. So as few words as possible. And then, you know, I think a key is liking your humor, you know, finding something that makes you laugh.
Yes.
When I get up and perform, people ask me, aren't you nervous, or, you know, have you bombed, or, and none of that's happened, because I'm telling my story one joke at a time, and it's true and it's real. And I also like my jokes. And so, and people laugh, but I like them. So I enjoy telling them. I'm not nervous about it because I like it. I know it's funny. But to me, so that's good enough.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that a lot.
So those are some of the keys to comedy. And then just letting your mind go and saying, you know, where's the humor in that? And if someone's living with a mental health challenge, with anxiety or with depression or with the mania and PTSD, just the act of asking that question changes everything, because it changes that pathway. It changes that trigger. You don't go back to that trauma. You take a turn, and you go somewhere else, and it changes everything.
Yeah. And that kind of leads to what I was going to ask you, Dave, is do you think it's changing your whole perspective of the traumatic situation, because it's no longer controlling you? You're seeing it from a different viewpoint.
I think that's huge, because it controlled me. It controls so many people, and the anxiety and the trauma, the PTSD, the panic attacks definitely controlled me. And after I learned the stand-up comedy and started teaching, it gave me control over that.
Yeah.
I could say, where's the humor in that? I could control how I responded. My mom was a great lady, and she gave me a book by James Allen, and the book was essentially, to get it down to the basics, is you control how you think, and how you think determines how you feel. So you can determine how you feel by what you think. And she had that, and I internalized that. But one of my challenges with the mental illness was I kept trying to do that, but with the bipolar disorder, I just couldn't. And I thought, you know, why am I such a bad person? I pray to God to help me, just give me peace of mind, to help me be a better person. And because it was hell that I was going through for years and years and years. It's almost indescribable how bad it was. But, you know, finally with the humor, I've got control over my life and my mind and how things impact me. It's huge, and it's given me some peace of mind. And I help others. I see the same thing happening with others.
Well, it's a very, I don't want to say common, because it's not common. It's common around here. Let's put it that way. It's typical for guests who are on the show, because they've gone through some kind of dark night of the soul. They learned something along the way that was useful, and now they want to share it with other people. And that's exactly what you're doing. Yeah.
And there's a commonality. There's a similarity. We're kind of fellow travelers in a sense, you know, different roads maybe, but fellow travelers.
Right.
And so I've enjoyed listening, you know, listening to your shows and hearing the folks, and done a little research on some people and processes and things. And, you know, it's very interesting. There's a little, like I said, we're fellow travelers in a sense.
That's fabulous. Thank you for being a listener. I appreciate that.
You bet.
I'm also curious too. I mean, I don't really consider myself to be a comedian, but I like to introduce humor when I can here on the show.
Yeah.
And my favorite way to do it is if I can spot something that is an absurd way of describing something, I'll go for it. And a lot of the time it doesn't turn into anything funny. I don't really worry about whether it's going to be funny, but I like to go there anyway, because sometimes it's funny in ways I didn't even think about, and then everybody else is laughing. It's like, oh, I guess that's funny, isn't it? Right?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's creative for you. I mean, it gets you. I think it's so healthy that, you know, we don't have to be serious. We can look at things. We look at things and see things in a totally different way, and it changes everything. I have a joke for you if you'd like to hear one
No,
about.
we hate jokes around here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Of
no,
course, love
we
to.
don't like laughing.
And
No,
this is,
terrible stuff.
yeah, you know, no
Bad for
direction.
you. Yeah.
Yeah, don't get, you know, I've performed, I've written, I mean, hundreds of jokes. So you know, once I go off, I can go, but I won't do that to you. I won't perform. But, and this one doesn't have anything to have to do with mental illness, but it kind of has with a higher being. There's my daughter, Megan, she was in first grade and she was at her desk and she was drawing, and the teacher came up and looked over her shoulder and said, "Megan, that's interesting. What are you drawing?" And Megan said, "It's a picture of God." And the teacher said, "Megan, nobody knows what God looks like." And Megan said, "They will in a minute."
They will in a minute. Yeah.
So the joy of anyway, who knows where these things come from? Yeah.
Yeah. That to me is kind of what I was referring to, how you reach for something that, you know, in just normal conversation would be kind of absurd, but in that context, it's not just funny, it's cute, it's wonderful.
Yeah. And you know, it's something you can tell everybody. And I've got another one. I won't get any more simple than this one. And if I tell any more, they'll be mental health related, I promise. But do you know the difference between a British squirrel and an Oregon squirrel? The accent.
No.
The accent. I know, so dumb. Squirrel with an accent.
What I love though is we quite often hear that people turn to try and find gratitude and something to be grateful for out of their experience. And I love the fact you've turned it into comedy rather than necessarily, because, you know, you hear of laughter therapy and it really does make a difference. And I love, you know, the change in that perspective that it gives. But I can't help wondering how hard it must have been to go to that first meeting.
You know, again,
Did it feel like you were meant to be there?
It was interesting. I thought, okay, I meant to be there. And it was funny. People went around and told their story. So I told my story. And you know, I mean, a quick 3-minute, you know, had it all, lost it all, homeless, blah, 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 blah. My dad lost his life to suicide. Yeah, you know, all these different things. So I went through and told my story. And then the comic teacher looked at me and said, "That's just sad." And it was just sad.
Yeah.
And so I sat back and I wondered why, you know, if that was the right place for me. But after a couple times, I just kept going back. And
well done.
A lot of it was like, again, for my wife, you know, she said, "Go." So, you know, I went. And then, you know, one of the, you know, I take medication for my mental illness, my bipolar, and one of the side effects from the medication is weight gain. True to form, when I was taking the medication, I gained 30 pounds. So I decided to join a club, and I started working out, and I started doing a treadmill. It didn't take me long to realize the treadmill was a perfect exercise for someone with a mental illness, because you do the same thing over and over again. And you never get anywhere.
You never get anywhere, right?
And then the other day I was working out, and the guy next to me looked over and he said, "You're not going very fast." I said, "That's okay. My mind's racing." That's an anxiety joke based in truth. Yeah.
Yes.
Finished with a laugh.
That's great. I love that.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things that I love about that the most, it's clean humor. I mean,
certainly
it's based in some horrible trauma, some horrible pain you've been through, but it's clean.
Yeah.
I mean, it's wonderful for that.
Yeah, and that's one of my rules. The classes I teach, you know, we go everywhere in the class. I mean, we go to our darkest days and our experiences, and we just, you know, we go everywhere. But what we end up with is clean, and it's more challenging to keep it clean.
Yeah.
There's no shock and something to make people laugh. It's got to be clever. It's going to be funny. It's got to be based in truth, and you know, it's got to be enlightening. It's and the people that see the shows, you know, it has a huge impact. It does two things for people there who live with a mental illness. They relate and they laugh and they see themselves and they see the humor in it, and that's huge for them. And then other people, it shatters the stigma. And here are these people with manic depression, bipolar disorder, PTSD, all these different diagnoses, and here they're upstage on stage telling their story one joke at a time.
Yeah.
And everybody's laughing, and people realize it's okay to laugh, and they laugh, and yeah.
I personally, I mean, I know that comedians who tell dirty jokes and off color humor and so forth are very popular. I know a lot of people like that. I've never really liked it very much. I mean, I can hear a comedian going blue and I'll just sit there like, okay, yeah. Are you gonna say something funny? That's the way it feels to me. But somebody comes along and tells me something that's clean like that. To me, that's funny. That's where all of a sudden I want to laugh at it. So yeah, I really appreciate that. I mean, I'm not just saying that. I really appreciate that. I like that a lot.
Yeah, I think it's better humor. You sometimes, I mean, there's a lot of blue humor, and it's said for the shock value, not because it's clever, not because it's funny. It's the shock,
right?
And people feel like they have to. And yeah, I don't. It's there. It can be funny, but usually it's not.
No.
So
yeah, it's
that's
kind of
my opinion.
actually.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think there's actually a reason for that. I think the reason is for somebody who finds it to be humorous, and if you're a listener who finds blue humor to be humorous, please don't take what I'm about to say as being an attack or an insult or something like that, because I don't mean it that way. But I will say that I think that for the most part, when people find that funny, they're finding it funny because they're insecure about something within themselves.
Something's going on.
I think so. Yeah, that's what. I mean, you made reference to the idea that they might be feeling like they have to because socially it would be acceptable to laugh at that. You're supposed to laugh at that. Well, that's feeling uncomfortable within yourself. That's what that is.
Yeah, yeah.
Whereas when you're laughing at something that's clean, now you're just enjoying the fact that we deal with absurd things in life. Now it's no longer a question of how low your self-esteem is or how poor you feel. It's more what can you appreciate, which is a completely different vibration.
Completely. Yeah. And the other thing with, go ahead.
Sorry, Dave. I was just gonna say, do you think people find it more relatable? Because everybody goes through life with a bit of depression or a bit of anxiety, or something comes into their life, and if you're talking openly about it in a real way, they can relate and then joke themselves about it. And I think that's probably what's quite attractive about it, is that people can relate to it.
Yeah, people, the statistic is about 17% of the population lives with mental health challenge at any one particular point in time, usually depression or anxiety. And so, everybody's either been there or knows somebody that's been there. So yeah, it's very relatable. It's very relatable, and maybe not to the depth that we've experienced. It might,
Sure.
I've experienced it, but it's definitely relatable. And the other thing about, I'll just let that pass, but yeah, it's definitely relatable.
I'm reminded of one of the things that I heard about Robin Williams while he was still with us, and I guess you call it the method or the mindset that he would get himself into, because he was a very demonstrative comedian. We all know what he was like. He was one of a kind. There was nobody ever like him before. I doubt if there will ever be anybody like him in the future. He was truly remarkable and unique. But his method included not only getting up either on stage or on screen or on film or whatever to do his routine, but in between periods, when he's waiting for a set change or he's waiting to go onto a show, or maybe he's just off, in his private world, he would just sit quietly with his partner. They would hold hands, and that was it. There would be no talking. There would be no interaction. It was as if he was recharging himself for the next session, which I found remarkable.
Yeah, it is remarkable. And I can relate to that, to sit and just to be and to have peace of mind and just to let it happen.
Mm-hmm.
There isn't that nervousness, that anxiety. It's just, clearing your mind and letting it be pure, I think. Maybe, he was such an incredible talent.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well, I
I
actually
would love to be
wondered
in
if he
his
had a
band.
bit of bipolar, to be honest.
Yeah,
Not a lot, but I wonder if he had a little bit.
yeah, I've got to think so, because just because I've got to think so. And I was on PBS after he died. I was on PBS and doing a show there talking about it, and that came up, and something was going on in his brain. He was brilliant.
Mm-hmm. I remember he was on a television program that Emery, you may not know this one. It's an American program on cable TV called Inside the Actors Studio, and hosted by a man named James Lipton. And the appearance, first of all, it's one of the very few comedy routines I actually have a DVD of, because it was that memorable. Especially the first 12 minutes were just classic Robin. I mean, literally, there was like 8 minutes of Robin, and then there was James Lipton saying, "For my first question." I mean, that's it was like that.
Yeah.
And Lipton had a stack of cards this high of all the questions he was going to ask. So, Robin looked at it and said, "We're going to be here for a while, aren't we?"
Yeah, exactly.
But I recall it so vividly. And one of the things that I recall about it was that he had this tremendous ability to not only to perform and to be on that high where he was constantly throwing all this comedy at you, but to do it in a way that made you think he thought really fast. That's what I was thinking about, Dave, when you gave your little joke about how, your mind is doing the racing. It seemed to everybody else like his mind was racing so much faster than anybody else. And I remember James Lipton's question. He says, "Are you really thinking faster than everybody else? What the hell's going on up there?" That pretty much summarized it up with Robin Williams. It was amazing.
Yeah. And everything looked like it was just stream of consciousness, and a lot of it was, but he put his work in.
He did
put his work in. And like I said, I edit my jokes. I'm editing jokes. You ready for another joke?
Absolutely.
Sure.
Okay. Discrimination, having mental illness, I see discrimination where other people don't. Take happy hour, for instance.
Okay.
I think happy hour is being discriminatory. There should also be a crappy hour for depressed people.
Okay.
And bipolar people could go to both.
Yes, this is true.
Yeah. That joke, I had it for like 5 years, and it was, there should also be an unhappy hour for depressed people.
Yeah.
And I was talking to my son and came up with crappy hour for depressed people.
I like that.
So much better. And it took out that extra syllable that didn't fit.
Yeah.
And
so rule. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was something that was in there, that thinking about, and unhappy hour, and what. So crappy hour.
So what you're describing there for us is you're describing the creative process, and how that it isn't something that you're necessarily creating on stage while you're doing something. You work it out in advance. You're crafting as you go along, day by day. You're crafting different little messages that you can share.
Yeah, it's jokes will come to mind. Like I'll get triggered and a joke will come to mind, and then I'll start thinking about that joke, and it's working that, where can I find the humor in that, or whatnot, and then I'll start editing the joke, and I usually when I edit it, it's taking something out rather than putting something in, or just moving a couple words around. But yeah, it's always happening. I know it's always happening with other comics. And I've moved along to, finding humor in things outside of the mental health area, and that's kind of fun. But it's not necessarily my, my lane. So I do it, but it's mostly for fun.
Sure. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, I get the idea, and you tell me if I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. I get the idea that you like this process. You like this creative process of
Oh,
finding
yeah.
stuff. I mean, it's looking for the funny stuff continuously throughout your day. That's the joy.
It is the joy. It's the creative process. When I was so depressed, and I mean, there was no creativity. My mind was a total blank, and it was awful. And so there was none, and I craved it. And now, with my writing and with the comedy, I get to use that creativity, and it fills me up. It truly fills me up.
Anne-Marie, are you feeling like I am? I'm feeling like inspired to look for more funny stuff in my life right now.
Definitely, because life can be so serious. I've had anxiety, and I can understand, how hard it is to actually feel motivated to do something, but trying to find the humor in it. And I'm just trying to sort of look back and find the humor in it. And you're right, there's always something you can find.
You have to look for it.
But it's quite a gift to be able to deliver that and make other people laugh.
Yeah, I think, first is to ask the question, and second is to realize that it's a process, and you're not going to find the funny in something in 5 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever. But when you have a little bit of quiet time, when you sit down and you're just being quiet, it'll bubble up.
Do you find, I mean, this is generally true for anything that comes to me in any form of inspiration, but do you find that the ideas come to you when you least expect it?
Yes, trying works. I've done it enough so I can sit down and say, okay, I'm going to write some jokes. But usually there's some inspiration, and and that's how it happens. It happens from the quiet. It happens from it's a surprise that it's happening, and that's the best way. I mean, that's the best time. That's it.
Do you laugh at your own joke the first time you hear it? No.
No, I don't laugh at my own jokes.
Not
I
even
enjoy them. but I
enjoy
don't.
them.
I don't
Okay.
laugh at them. Yeah.
Yeah.
I let other people laugh at them. And it's funny. A lot of my jokes I've been doing for years and years and years. I still find them funny because I just, they're so. You talk about absurdity. They're so absurd. They're just so absurd. When things were really bad, I think I told you that my wife's the hero of my story, and
Right.
but during those dark days, there was a time that I decided to end it all, and so I went up into the bathroom and I took a bunch of pills, and afterwards I called my wife for help. She said there are more pills under the sink.
Jeez. Oh my goodness. Oh, now that actually works.
I didn't know that was going to be a joke.
Exactly. Yeah.
That works because if I tell that joke, that comes off as insensitive. If you tell that joke, that works. That just plain works.
Yeah, exactly. And I've never had anybody complain about that joke, or just people love it. But it's based in truth. I was suicidal at one point in time and seriously considered it. So that's where that came from. The rest of it, I don't know where it came from. It just comes, But teaching the classes, every class I've taught, everybody in the class has had suicidal ideation. They don't act on it, haven't acted on it, but they've had the ideation. They've thought about it. They've thought about how they would do it if they were going to do it.
Sure.
So, and having suicide jokes, like I said, in our classes, we go everywhere. Suicide's not funny, except when it is. And you're right. You telling it wouldn't work.
It wouldn't work.
Yeah, it wouldn't work.
No.
Wouldn't work.
No, get a lot of negative feedback about that.
Yeah, you would.
So,
but yeah.
But I just love the fact that therapy comes in different shapes and sizes, but the fact that this one is so fun, and you must also get joy from making other people laugh. I know you can make the humor out of your experience, but making somebody else laugh, that's actually quite a nice feeling as well, isn't it?
It is, because you see them relating to what
Mm-hmm.
the jokes are. In the classes, it's very rewarding. People come in. Molly's an example. Molly was a doctor. She had to give up practicing medicine due to her bipolar disorder. And she came to a comedy class and she was suicidal. Her mom said, I'm worried about her. She's suicidal. I know she's not going to be here soon. And she took the class and we started to find the funny. And she was a doctor. It's everything she wanted to be, and now she couldn't be it. Now she'd never be it. And now she'd lost everything. But she took the class, and we found the funny in her experiences, and we found funny in her not being a doctor because of her manic depression. And now Molly, her mom said it saved her life.
Wow.
And now Molly, she's not a doctor, but she considers herself a comic.
Mm-hmm.
And she performs around town, and now that's her identity, and she feels good about it.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, that stuff's happening. Another lady, I run a small mental health nonprofit also here in Portland, and a lady, every time she talked about her life, she talked about her dad who left them when she was little, and he went on to become a famous psychologist, well-written, published, all these kind of things. And every time, every group, every meeting, every time she was talking to people, she told that. And it was, it was terrible for her to live with that. Mm-hmm. So I had to take a class, and one day I told her, okay, Margaret, you go home and you think about that, and then you try to find something. Where's the humor in that?
Yeah.
And she did that, and a couple of weeks later, it was like she was a completely different person. She was completely different. She wasn't sad. She wasn't depressed. She was talking about other things. She was optimistic. The transformation was truly amazing. So, yeah, what we're doing, finding humor, and how it happens. It's you talk about laughter therapy, where people laugh, and laughter is great. It's just so many good things for us. But to find the comedy and laugh during that time, I think, is even a better way to go about it.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
I am curious about one thing, though, because I asked you earlier whether or not you laughed at your own humor, and you told me you don't really laugh at your own humor. So it does kind of beg the question, like, what do you laugh at?
Yeah, wow.
I mean, Robin Williams is an easy draw. Maybe you can just grab that.
Yeah. I'd laugh at the other comics, the comics that I've taught and helped write jokes. I laugh when they tell a joke that I've helped them write. So they've come up with the setup or the basis for it and whatnot, and I help them with the punchline, and they tell that joke, and I laugh. Yeah. And I think that's just as funny as can be. And it's, and then but yeah, I don't, I enjoy more than I laugh. But I'll laugh at just you talk about absurd things or those types of things, and I'll laugh. If somebody's really clever, if there's a comic that's clever and it's smart and it's funny and sharp and clean, I can really enjoy that.
You made a great distinction a moment ago. You said, I enjoy rather than laugh. And I love that distinction for a couple of reasons. First of all, because you're basically getting to enjoyment through humor, but without the laughter. That's fabulous. That's the ball game right there. That's how you get better, no matter what your situation is. That's how you made yourself better. I mean, now I understand how you got there through that phrase, the fact that you found enjoyment in it.
And purpose. Humor. I mean, like I said, I like my jokes. And so the comedy and the humor. the purpose.
Mm.
Who was I? What did I have? What was my purpose when everything fell apart, when we went into that time and we had all those lost years and dark days and years and years and years before I could even work those 12 hours a week at minimum wage at Macy's. And, what was my purpose? And, my purpose was family and doing the best I could. But other than that, I was depressed and sad and had no purpose. This has given me purpose, helping people with a mental illness. First of all, just being a fellow traveler, listening to them with non-judgment, letting them know that, just accepting people for who they are. And that makes a huge difference. And then helping people find a different way of looking at their situation and helping them look for humor. And then getting out and shattering the stigma one joke at a time.
You just brought another very important point to my mind. And I think it's one that is true across the board for any kind of humor. It's going to especially be true for this kind of humor that we're talking about here, but really for any humor, the distinction between enjoying something and judging it. Because I mean, all humor is based, you could twist something around to say, well, all humor has a judgment to it. And to a certain extent, there's truth to that. But the real truth is that when someone is sharing particularly clean humor, there's not actually any judgment going on. There's a pointing to the fact that, well, somebody could be judging this, but we're not. That's a big difference in my mind.
That is a big difference, yeah. And Portland tends to be a pretty judgmental town.
Sure.
And I've been advised not to say this joke or that joke during a show. And I ignore it completely. I'm not going to be censored because someone might be offended by this or might be triggered by that. I think the people that do say that are not the people who live with a mental health challenge or might be triggered or whatnot. They're the help profession, the social workers, the therapists. Those are the people that think somebody else might be triggered, and I feel strongly that that's the worst kind of ableism, because they're saying we with a mental illness can't control our emotions, or we're so weak that we're going to be triggered by a joke or a word or something. And we're not. We're strong and we're able, and we can laugh at ourselves and laugh at our situations, and don't do things about us without us. Don't try to help us in those ways. Treat us well.
I would imagine that makes some people feel less alone. Like, oh gosh, somebody else feels like I do. And you don't feel like you're just so isolated by it.
That's huge. And in my book, OMG, That's Me, Bipolar Disorder, Depression, Anxiety, Panic Attacks, and More. I started blogging for bphope.com, and my post's been read by over 1 million people. And the most common comment is, OMG, you're telling my story. I don't feel so alone now. And so that's what was happening. And so I took the best blog posts, most positive comments, the ones that really people related to, and put them in the book. OMG, That's Me. And sold over 20,000 copies. And
Congratulations.
Usually self-publish, you sell 50, friends and family. And that's it.
That's an accomplishment. 20,000.
Yeah. So, but people get it and they relate to it. They see themselves. They give it to family. If one wants to know what it's really like to live with a mental illness, that's the book. And then OMG, That's Me 3 is about healing with humor. It's about the comedy. It's about Molly. She's chapter 6, transformation sheet. And so if you want to know, you want to see the humor and how that impacts people, then OMG, That's Me 3 is the book. We have audiobooks on both, and the OMG, That's Me. Actually, the audiobooks now are outselling paperbacks.
Wow. Congratulations on that too. That's big.
And it's the whole thing. Well, and Anne-Marie is like, who knew? Go figure. I'm just writing this thing and enjoying it and doing the best I can and making a difference in people's lives, and the rest is taking care of itself.
Yeah.
If I would have said about okay, I'm going to write a book, I'm going to sell 20,000 copies, and I'm going to make a lot of money. All the wrong reasons. And
not the reason why you really want to be doing it in the first place.
No, writing it so people know that they're not alone, and that it does get better and there is help. That's a good reason. Then you write it for that reason, good things happen.
That's a really great story. I love that.
It's just a positive side effect.
Yep.
A couple questions before we wrap things up here. First of all, since you like helping people and you've made it your mission in life to help other people going through similar issues as yourself through humor, I presume that means that you want to be contacted by somebody who's interested in reaching out. How does somebody find you who wants to contact you?
Well, a couple things is, one, they can reach out to NAMI, National Alliance on Mental Illness. They've got 800 affiliates across the country.
Okay.
So everybody has a local NAMI, and reach out to NAMI because they are non-judgmental, they're supportive, and it's a great place to start. Education, support, and advocacy. So it's a good place. For me, reach out on my Facebook or LinkedIn, message me, and I respond to everybody. And if you got something you think, if you just whatever, like I said, I mean, it's purpose, make a difference in people's lives. And I'd look forward to it. With my kids and now my grandkids, they head off to school. And I'd tell them, the last thing I'd tell them, every day I'd tell them to do the best and to do something nice for somebody. And from the time they were little, and as they got older, they'd come home and sit at the kitchen table and say, "Dad, I did something nice for somebody today." And it's just the smallest little things. So doing something nice for somebody, it makes somebody else's day a little brighter, but it brings us happiness and joy that we never, you don't do it because you expect anything in return, and you end up with happiness and joy.
Yeah, well, that's what you do get in return. You get a better mindset. You get new neural pathways, to make reference to the neuroplasticity you were talking about.
Yep. So I've got lots of neural pathways going there. Jumping around, jumping over, and some I've got detours, stop signs, barricades. I don't know what's going on up there. I'd like to be in Robin Williams' brain and see what's happening up there.
A lot of people wanted to be in his brain, figuring out what was going on. He was often trying to figure out what was going on up there.
I bet. Yeah. For sure. Yeah.
Anne-Marie, what I always come to you for this, but what's your takeaway today? I mean, when you grab like the one thing that grabbed your attention, what is that?
I think for me, the world just needs more laughter in it, and I love the fact that this is a different kind of therapy, and it's a different way of viewing things. So I know sometimes when I've had sort of mental health problems or issues, I've been really hard on myself, and this, not beating yourself up, but finding the humor in it gives a whole new perspective. So the thing that stuck with me throughout all of this, and the thing that I will continue to be thinking about, is, where is the humor in this?
Yes. What a wonderful question to ask yourself too throughout the day.
Isn't it?
Oh yeah. When the guy cuts you off and on the freeway, where can I find the humor in that?
Mm-hmm.
Changes everything. Next time somebody cuts you off in traffic, it doesn't bother you at all.
And it carries over to other areas of life they don't even expect to carry it over.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's fabulous.
Yeah, it's been great to talk to you guys. I really appreciate the opportunity. I'm glad you guys are doing what you're doing, and as fellow travelers, we just keep on keeping on.
Well, we appreciate you so much, and if you have been listening to the episodes like you have been, I think you have been, then there's one more thing left that I have to do, which is say on behalf of those people you've never met, never seen, never will meet, never will see, who've been hearing you, who've been listening to your jokes, who've been even hearing about what was going on in the groups that you were joining, or hearing from people that you helped to train to develop their humor. You touched them in ways you didn't even know about. On their behalf, thank you for what you're doing, Dave, because you're making a huge difference in this world.
Oh, thank you. You are too. Well, you are too, Anne-Marie, and I appreciate that.
We appreciate you too.
Appreciate you.
Yeah.
And we appreciate our audience everywhere as well. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.